The security camera footage from that Tuesday morning shows a figure in dark clothing approaching the glass facade of the Meridian Tower at exactly 6:47 a.m. What it doesn't show is the 3-month journey that led Maya Rodriguez to that moment, or the bet that would change everything she thought she knew about fear, friendship, and the limits of human determination. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had always been the practical one. While her college roommates spent weekends bungee jumping or skydiving, she preferred her feet firmly planted on solid ground. Her idea of adventure was trying a new coffee shop or taking a different route to work. At 26, she worked as a structural engineer for Pinnacle Design, spending her days calculating load-bearing capacities and stress points from the safety of her 20th floor office. The irony wasn't lost on her that she designed buildings she'd never dream of climbing. The transformation began on a humid Friday evening in downtown Phoenix. Maya sat across from her childhood friend, Jessica Chen, at their usual spot in Copper and Stone, a trendy restaurant with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a perfect view of the city's skyline. They'd been meeting for dinner every few weeks since college, maintaining the friendship that had survived Jessica's evolution from studious pre-med student to adrenaline-seeking emergency room physician. "You're playing it too safe, Maya," Jessica said, swirling the wine in her glass. "When's the last time you did something that genuinely scared you?" Maya considered the question while picking at her salmon. "I gave a presentation to the board last month. That was terrifying." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Jessica leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "I'm talking about real fear, physical fear, the kind that makes your heart pound and your palms sweat. Why would I want to feel that way? Because that's when you're truly alive. That's when you discover what you're actually capable of." Their conversation might have ended there, like dozens of similar discussions over the years, if not for what happened next. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed Maya a video of a woman free-climbing the exterior of a 40-story building in Dubai. The footage was shot from a drone, capturing every death-defying moment as the climber ascended using only her hands and feet, finding purchase on window ledges, architectural details, and the subtle imperfections in the building's facade. "This is Alana Kowalski," Jessica explained. "She's a professional urban climber. She's conquered buildings all over the world, Tokyo, London, Sydney, but she's never attempted anything in Phoenix." Maya watched in fascination and horror as the tiny figure on the screen moved with spider-like precision up the vertical surface. "This is insane, and probably illegal." "Maybe. But look at her, look at the focus, the control, the absolute mastery of her fear." "You're not seriously suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything." Jessica's smile was mischievous. "I'm proposing a challenge." Maya set down her fork. "What kind of challenge?" "The Meridian Tower, 50 stories of glass and steel, right here in Phoenix. If you can climb it, the exterior wall, no equipment except climbing shoes and chalk, I'll pay off your student loans." The number hit Maya like a physical blow, $87,000. The debt that had been hanging over her head since graduation, dictating every financial decision, keeping her in a job she'd outgrown, prevented her from taking the risks that might lead to real career advancement. "You're joking." "I'm completely serious. My signing bonus from the new hospital position was more than I expected. I can afford it." Maya stared at her friend. "And if I can't do it?" "Then you take that vacation to Europe you've been talking about for 3 years. My treat. 2 weeks, anywhere you want to go." It was a win-win proposition, except for the minor detail that attempting to climb a 50-story building could result in death. Maya's engineering mind immediately began calculating the variables. Wind shear at that height, the structural integrity of the building's exterior elements, the likelihood of security intervention. "The Meridian Tower doesn't have setbacks until the 40th floor," she said, almost to herself. "The facade is mostly glass with a steel framework. There are maintenance ledges every 10th floor, but they're narrow. So you've thought about it." Maya realized she had been studying the building with a climber's eye rather than an engineer's. "I work across the street from it. I see it every day." Then you know it's possible. Knowing something is structurally possible and actually doing it are completely different things. "I've never climbed anything higher than a ladder." So learn. Over the next hour, Jessica systematically dismantled every objection Maya raised. Too dangerous? They'd hire a professional instructor. No experience? They had 3 months to train. Illegal? They'd find a way to get permission, or at least ensure minimal consequences. Fear of heights? That was the whole point. "Why are you doing this?" Maya finally asked. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city lights. "Because I see you settling for less than what you're capable of." "You're brilliant, Maya. You could design revolutionary buildings, change skylines, push the boundaries of what's possible. Instead, you're calculating bathroom tile loads for strip malls." The words stung because they were true. Maya had once dreamed of designing structures that would stand for centuries, buildings that would inspire and challenge the conventional wisdom of architecture. Instead, she'd chosen the safe path, the steady paycheck, the predictable career trajectory. And climbing a building is going to change that? Climbing a building is going to show you that the limits you think exist are mostly in your head. Maya looked up at the Meridian Tower, its glass surface reflecting the city lights like a vertical mirror. From street level, it seemed impossibly tall, a monument to human ambition and engineering precision. The thought of scaling its exterior wall by hand made her stomach clench with terror, which was exactly why she heard herself saying, "Okay." The word surprised them both. "Okay? I'll do it. I'll take your challenge." Jessica's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Are you sure? Because once we start training, once we commit to this, there's no backing down without losing face." Maya thought about her student loan statements, arriving every month like clockwork. She thought about her tiny apartment, her 10-year-old car, her careful budgeting that left no room for spontaneity or risk. She thought about the designs she'd sketched in her spare time but never shown to anyone, the creative ambitions she'd convinced herself were impractical. "I'm sure." That weekend, Maya found herself at Red Rock Climbing Gym, a converted warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix. The space was filled with artificial rock walls of varying difficulty, from beginner-friendly slopes to overhanging surfaces that seemed to defy gravity. The air smelled of chalk dust and rubber, and the sound of climbers calling out encouragement echoed from the high ceiling. Their instructor was Marcus Thompson, a wiry man in his early 30s with forearms like steel cables and a patient demeanor that immediately put Maya at ease. Jessica had found him through her network at the hospital. He'd treated several climbers over the years, and recommended Marcus as someone who understood both the physical and psychological aspects of the sport. "So you want to climb a building," Marcus said after Jessica explained their goal. "That's urban climbing, or building. It's a specialized discipline that requires specific skills." "Is it possible?" Maya asked. "For someone with no experience?" Marcus studied her for a moment, taking in her slight build, her obvious nervousness, the way she kept glancing up at the climbing walls around them. 3 months isn't a lot of time, but you've got some advantages. You're light, which helps with endurance, and your engineering background means you'll understand the structure you're climbing. He led them to the easiest wall, a gentle slope with large holds spaced conveniently apart. "Let's start with the basics." Maya strapped on her first pair of climbing shoes, tight-fitting, rubber-soled boots that felt like they were crushing her feet. Marcus showed her how to tie into the safety harness, how to use the belay device, how to communicate with her partner. The equipment felt foreign and uncomfortable, but she forced herself to focus on the technical aspects, treating it like any other skill she needed to master. Her first climb was a disaster. She made it perhaps 8 feet up the wall before her arms began shaking uncontrollably. The holds that had looked so obvious from the ground suddenly seemed impossibly small and far apart. Her feet skittered against the wall, unable to find purchase, and she hung from her arms like dead weight until Marcus lowered her down. "That's normal," he assured her as she caught her breath. "Climbing uses muscles you've never developed. Your body doesn't know how to move efficiently yet." I felt like I was about to fall the whole time. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You were never going to fall. The rope would have caught you. But your brain doesn't know that yet. Fear is the biggest obstacle for new climbers. Over the following weeks, Maya returned to the gym 3 times a week. She learned to read the wall, to plan her moves in advance, to trust her feet and use her legs to push rather than relying solely on her arms. Slowly, incrementally, she began to move with something approaching grace. The physical transformation was obvious. Her forearms grew ropey with muscle, her shoulders broadened, her core strength improved dramatically. But the mental changes were more profound. She began to understand what Jessica had meant about discovering her capabilities. Each successful climb, each problem solved, each fear overcome, revealed layers of potential she'd never known existed. Marcus introduced her to different styles of climbing: sport climbing with bolted protection, traditional climbing with removable gear, and eventually bouldering without ropes at all. Each discipline taught her something new about movement, risk assessment, and mental control. Building climbing is most similar to bouldering, he explained during one session. You're climbing without a rope, relying entirely on your ability to maintain contact with the wall. The difference is that if you fall from a boulder, you land on a mat. If you fall from a building, he didn't need to finish the sentence. By the end of the second month, Maya was climbing routes that had seemed impossible when she started. She could hang from small holds for minutes at a time, her fingers strong enough to support her entire body weight. More importantly, she'd learned to manage her fear, to acknowledge it, without being paralyzed by it. The real test came on a Saturday morning when Marcus took her to Camelback Mountain for her first outdoor climb. The red sandstone felt completely different under her hands, rougher, less predictable, with holds that crumbled if gripped too aggressively. The exposure was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Standing on a ledge 60 feet above the desert floor, Maya looked out over the Phoenix Valley and felt something she'd never experienced before, a sense of absolute presence, of being completely engaged with the moment. Her usual anxieties about work, money, and the future seemed trivial compared to the immediate demands of the rock. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. Maya considered the question seriously. "Alive," she said finally, "more alive than I've felt in years." "Then you're ready for the next phase." The next phase, as it turned out, involved studying the Meridian Tower with a climber's eye rather than an engineer's. Maya spent her lunch breaks across the street, using binoculars to map potential routes up the building's facade. She noted every architectural detail that might provide a handhold or foothold: window ledges, decorative elements, the subtle variations in the glass panels that created tiny edges. The building's design was both a blessing and a curse for climbing purposes. The glass curtain wall system meant there were regular vertical mullions that could provide a consistent line of holds, but the spacing was wider than what felt comfortable. The maintenance ledges every 10 floors would provide rest points, but reaching them would require sustained climbing over distances that pushed the limits of endurance. Maya's engineering knowledge proved invaluable in ways she hadn't expected. She understood the load distribution of the facade system, knew which elements were structural and which were merely decorative. She could calculate wind loads at different heights and predict how they might affect her climb. Most importantly, she knew that the building had been designed with maintenance access in mind. There were connection points and anchor systems that weren't visible from the ground, but could potentially be used for safety. As the third month of training began, Maya's entire life had restructured itself around the climb. She ate carefully, focusing on foods that would build strength and endurance. She slept 8 hours a night without exception. She practiced meditation and visualization techniques, mentally rehearsing the ascent over and over until she could climb the building in her dreams. The physical preparation was only part of the challenge. Jessica had been working behind the scenes to address the legal and logistical obstacles. Through connections in the medical community, she'd made contact with the building's management company, explaining that they were documenting an athletic achievement for a fitness documentary. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. The security concerns were more complex. The Meridian Tower had cameras, motion sensors, and a security team that worked around the clock. Any climb would need to be coordinated to minimize disruption and ensure that Maya wouldn't be arrested halfway up the building. "We've got a window," Jessica announced during one of their training sessions. "Next Tuesday morning, between 6 and 8 a.m. The building's having maintenance work done on the upper floors, so there's going to be equipment and personnel already in place. Our climb will blend in with the authorized activity." Maya felt her stomach drop. Next Tuesday? As in 5 days from now? The timing is perfect. Early morning means minimal wind, better visibility, and fewer people around to create complications. "I don't know if I'm ready." Marcus, who had been quietly adjusting ropes, looked up. "You're as ready as you're going to be. We could train for another year, but at some point, You have to trust your preparation and commit to action. That night, Maya stood on her apartment balcony, looking across the city at the Meridian Tower. Its glass surface caught the last light of sunset, transforming it into a golden pillar that seemed to touch the sky. In 5 days, she would attempt to climb every foot of that vertical surface, using nothing but her hands, her feet, and everything she'd learned about conquering fear. The enormity of the challenge finally hit her with full force. This wasn't a gym wall with preset holds and a rope for protection. This was 50 stories of unforgiving glass and steel, with wind, exposure, and the constant possibility of a fatal fall. If she succeeded, she would achieve something remarkable and life-changing. If she failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. Maya gripped the balcony railing and felt the familiar flutter of terror in her chest. But underneath the fear was something new, a quiet confidence born from months of training, preparation, and gradual expansion of what she believed possible. She was ready to climb. Monday night arrived with unseasonable storm clouds gathering over Phoenix. Maya watched the weather reports obsessively, her phone buzzing with updates every few minutes. Rain would make the climb impossible. Wet glass became a death trap, offering no grip for even the most experienced climber. The forecast called for clearing skies by dawn, but weather predictions in the desert were notoriously unreliable. At 3 a.m., Maya gave up any pretense of sleep and made her way to the kitchen. Her pre-climb meal had been planned for weeks. Oatmeal with banana and honey for sustained energy, scrambled eggs for protein, and green tea for alertness without the jitters that coffee might cause. She ate mechanically, her mind running through the route she'd memorized. The first 20 floors would be the most technically challenging. The glass panels there had minimal texture, requiring her to rely on the narrow gaps between sections and the slight protrusions of the window frames. Floors 21 through 30 featured more architectural detail, decorative steel elements that would provide better holds but were spaced irregularly, demanding precise footwork and core strength to navigate the gaps. Her phone vibrated at 4:30 a.m. A text from Jessica, "Weather's clearing. Meet at the staging point in 90 minutes." Maya showered and dressed in her climbing outfit, form-fitting athletic wear in dark gray that would blend with the building's color scheme, specially modified with reinforced knees and shoulders. Her climbing shoes were broken in perfectly, the rubber still tacky but molded to her feet. She tucked chalk into small pouches on her belt and clipped an emergency whistle to her shirt, the only concession to safety gear that wouldn't interfere with her mobility. The drive through empty Phoenix streets felt surreal. Traffic lights blinked yellow in the pre-dawn darkness, and the city seemed suspended between night and day. Maya parked 3 blocks from the Meridian Tower, her hands steady on the steering wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Jessica waited in the shadow of a construction scaffolding across from the building, accompanied by Marcus and 2 people Maya didn't recognize, a woman with professional camera equipment and a man whose bearing suggested security or law enforcement background. "This is Sarah Kim," Jessica said, introducing the woman with the camera. "She's documenting everything for our legal protection. And this is Detective Raymond Torres. He's off duty but here to make sure we handle any complications properly." Maya nodded to both but kept her attention on the building looming above them. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and still. Perfect conditions for climbing if there was such a thing. "Last chance to change your mind," Marcus said quietly. "Once you start, there's no safe way to come down except to finish the climb." "I'm doing this." Torres stepped forward, his expression serious. "I need you to understand the legal situation. Technically, this is trespassing. We've arranged for minimal security presence during your climb, but if something goes wrong, if you fall, if emergency services get involved, there will be consequences beyond the physical ones." "I understand." "No, I don't think you do." His voice was gentle but firm. "If you fall from that building, it doesn't just affect you. The first responders who have to deal with the aftermath, the witnesses who see it happen, the building owners who face liability. Your decision creates ripples you might not have considered." Maya felt her resolve waver for the first time in weeks. The weight of responsibility extended beyond her own risk-taking to encompass everyone who would be touched by the consequences of failure. "That's exactly why I'm going to succeed," she said finally. The staging area was a small courtyard adjacent to the Meridian Tower, screened from street view by landscaping and temporarily free of security cameras due to the maintenance work Jessica had arranged. Maya approached the base of the building and placed her palms against the cool glass surface. The first handhold was a narrow ledge at the base of the second-floor windows, barely wide enough for her fingertips. Maya chalked her hands, took 3 deep breaths, and began to climb. The initial moves felt controlled and familiar. She'd practiced similar sequences hundreds of times in the gym, and her body moved with trained precision. Right hand to the window frame, left foot finding purchase on a slight irregularity in the glass panel. Shift weight, reach higher. The building's facade responded exactly as she'd anticipated from her engineering analysis. By the 3rd floor, Maya had found her rhythm. Each floor presented variations on the same basic challenge: reading the subtle differences in the building's surface, finding the optimal sequence of moves, maintaining 3 points of contact while shifting her weight upward. The morning air remained still, a blessing that eliminated the complication of wind pressure against her body. Below, Sarah moved position to capture different angles, while Jessica, Marcus, and Torres tracked Maya's progress through binoculars. The team had rehearsed communication protocols, but at this height, Maya was essentially on her own. The 6th floor brought the first real test. A section of the window frame had been replaced during recent maintenance, and the new hardware didn't match Maya's reconnaissance notes. The hold she'd planned to use simply wasn't there. She hung from her left hand while her right explored the unfamiliar terrain, feeling for alternatives. Maya's training kicked in. Instead of fighting the unexpected change, she adapted, using a smaller hold that required more precise balance, but ultimately provided a secure path upward. The solution was actually more elegant than her original plan, flowing naturally into the sequence for the 7th floor. As she climbed higher, the city began to wake up below her. Early commuters appeared on the sidewalks, most too focused on their destinations to look up and notice the figure ascending the building's face. Those who did spot her stopped and pointed, some pulling out phones to record the unusual sight. By the 10th floor, Maya reached her first planned rest point, a maintenance ledge wide enough to stand on, with a low safety rail that provided psychological comfort, if not actual protection. She allowed herself 60 seconds to shake out her arms and assess her condition. Her forearms showed the expected pump from sustained gripping, but not the desperate burning that would signal impending failure. Her legs felt strong, and her core remained stable. More importantly, her mental state was calm and focused. The fear was still there, but it had transformed from paralyzing terror into heightened awareness that sharpened rather than clouded her judgment. The view from 10 floors up revealed Phoenix spreading in all directions, the geometric patterns of streets and buildings extending to the horizon. Maya had studied this vista from office windows countless times, but seeing it as an active participant rather than passive observer changed everything. She wasn't just looking at the city, she was engaging with it, using its vertical dimension as few people ever would. Floor 11 through 20 passed in a blur of controlled movement. Maya's body had fully adjusted to the rhythm of the climb, each move flowing naturally into the next. She had entered what climbers called the flow state, a condition where conscious thought stepped aside and trained instinct took control. The 20th floor marked a significant milestone. Maya had now climbed higher than she'd ever been without mechanical assistance, higher than most people would ever venture by choice. The building's facade began to change character here, incorporating more decorative elements that would provide both opportunities and challenges. A group of construction workers on a neighboring building had noticed her ascent and gathered at their windows to watch. Some called out encouragement, others shook their heads in disbelief. Maya caught fragments of their commentary carried on the morning breeze but kept her attention focused on the immediate task. The 25th floor introduced a new complication. The sun had risen enough to begin warming the building's east face, and the glass surface started to heat up under her palms. What had been comfortably cool at ground level was becoming noticeably warm, though not yet problematic. Maya made a mental note to factor thermal effects into her pacing for the upper floors. At floor 30, Maya encountered her first serious technical challenge. The architectural details that had looked manageable from the ground proved to be more complex up close. A decorative steel band wrapped around the building at this level, creating an overhang that forced her to climb with her body angled outward from the wall. The position required extraordinary core strength to maintain, and Maya felt her abdominal muscles begin to burn as she worked through the sequence. The holds were solid, but their positioning demanded perfect technique. Any wasted motion or inefficient body position would drain her reserves before she could regain the vertical wall above. Maya paused at the most challenging point of the overhang, her body forming a human question mark against the building's face. 30 floors below, the sidewalk looked impossibly distant. She could see people gathering, their faces turned upward, some pointing phones in her direction. The attention was both motivating and distracting. She forced her focus back to the immediate problem. The key was commitment. Trying to climb timidly through the overhang would guarantee failure. Maya chalked her hands one more time, visualized the sequence of moves, and powered through with deliberate aggression. The relief of regaining the vertical wall above floor 30 was profound. Maya allowed herself another brief rest, checking in with her body systems. Her breathing was elevated but controlled. Her muscles showed fatigue but remained functional. Most critically, her grip strength remained solid, though she could feel the cumulative effects of 30 floors of sustained climbing. From this height, Phoenix looked like an elaborate model rather than a living city. Cars moved along the streets like toys, and people appeared as tiny figures going about their morning routines. The perspective was both humbling and empowering. Humbling because it revealed the vastness of the urban landscape, empowering because Maya was experiencing it through her own physical effort and skill. The communication system Jessica had arranged crackled to life. A small earpiece allowed ground contact without requiring Maya to carry a phone that might interfere with her climbing. "Maya, you're making incredible progress," Marcus's voice came through clearly. "How are you feeling?" "Strong," she replied, surprised by how true the statement was. "The route is exactly what we expected." "Copy that. Weather conditions remain perfect. You're about to enter the section we identified as most challenging. Floors 31 through 40. Remember to trust your preparation." Maya acknowledged and began the ascent toward the building's upper reaches, where the real test of her endurance and determination would begin. The morning sun painted the glass in shades of gold and amber, and Phoenix stretched endlessly in all directions below her feet. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The climb continued upward. The 31st floor marked the beginning of what Maya had privately termed the Gauntlet, a section where the building's architects had incorporated complex geometric patterns that created both opportunities and traps for an ascending climber. The decorative elements that looked elegant from street level became a three-dimensional puzzle that demanded split-second decisions and absolute precision. Maya paused at the transition point, studying the wall above her with fresh eyes. The morning sun had shifted position, creating shadows that revealed details invisible during her ground-based reconnaissance. What she'd identified as a continuous line of holds actually broke at the 33rd floor, forcing a lateral traverse across 12 feet of nearly smooth glass. The traverse would be the most exposed section of the entire climb. Maya would be moving horizontally while supporting her full body weight on fingertip holds, with no possibility of rest until she reached the far side. Failure here meant a swing back into the building's face, potentially injurious and definitely climb-ending. Maya began the traverse with calculated aggression, committing fully to each move rather than hesitating. Her left hand found a narrow gap between glass panels while her right foot pressed against a window frame's edge. The position felt precarious, but her training had taught her to trust geometry over intuition. Midway through the traverse, Maya encountered something no amount of preparation could have anticipated. A maintenance worker inside the building appeared at one of the windows, his face registering shock as he found himself inches away from a climber hanging outside his workplace. For a moment, both humans stared at each other through the glass, equally surprised by the encounter. The worker's initial alarm shifted to fascination as he realized what he was witnessing. Instead of calling security, he stepped back and gave Maya a thumbs up before disappearing from view. The brief human connection provided an unexpected boost of confidence as she completed the traverse and regained the vertical ascent line. Floor 35 brought a new physiological challenge. Maya's body was beginning to show the accumulated stress of sustained climbing. Her breathing had deepened, and she could feel her heart rate elevated beyond the normal range for sustained exercise. More concerning was the subtle tremor beginning in her forearms, the early warning sign that her grip strength was approaching its limits. Maya implemented the recovery techniques Marcus had drilled into her during training. She found a relatively stable position and performed a series of deliberate muscle releases, shaking out each limb individually while maintaining 3 points of contact with the building. The process bought her precious recovery time, but it also consumed minutes that were becoming increasingly valuable as her energy reserves diminished. The view from 35 floors revealed a phenomenon Maya hadn't anticipated. The city below was beginning to take on an abstract quality, the details of individual buildings and streets blending into patterns that looked more like aerial photography than lived reality. The psychological effect was disorienting. She felt simultaneously connected to and detached from the urban landscape that represented her normal existence. A new sound reached her ears. Helicopter rotors in the distance. Maya glanced toward the horizon and spotted a news helicopter approaching from the south. Word of her climb had apparently spread beyond the immediate area, transforming what had begun as a personal challenge into a public spectacle. "Maya, we're getting media attention," Jessica's voice crackled through the earpiece. "How do you want to handle this?" "I keep climbing," Maya replied without hesitation. "Whatever happens on the ground is secondary to finishing what we started." The helicopter maintained a respectful distance, but Maya could see camera equipment pointed in her direction. She pushed the awareness of being recorded to the back of her mind and focused on the immediate demands of floor 36. This section of the building featured a series of architectural flourishes that created what climbers called mystery holds, gripping surfaces that weren't obviously present but could be found by touch and experience. Maya's fingers explored the subtle variations in the glass and steel, feeling for imperfections that could support her weight. The process was meditative in its intensity. Each potential hold had to be tested carefully, loaded gradually to determine its reliability. A hold that felt solid initially might prove inadequate under full body weight, and discovering that fact after committing to a move could be catastrophic. Maya found herself drawing on skills she'd never formally learned but had absorbed through months of climbing different surfaces. Her fingertips had developed sensitivity that allowed her to assess hold quality through texture and temperature. Her feet had learned to find purchase on surfaces that would have seemed impossibly smooth when she began training. Floor 38 presented a different kind of challenge entirely. The sun's angle had changed enough to create significant thermal effects on the building's surface. The glass panels were now noticeably warm to the touch, and Maya could feel heat radiating from the steel framework. Her palms began to sweat despite the chalk, reducing friction and increasing the risk of slipping. Maya adjusted her technique to compensate for the changing conditions. She moved more quickly through sun-exposed sections, minimizing contact time with heated surfaces. When forced to pause, she sought positions in shadow where the building remained cooler. The chess match between climber and environment added another layer of complexity to an already demanding ascent. The 40th floor marked a psychological milestone that proved more significant than Maya had expected. She was now higher than most of Phoenix's other buildings, climbing through airspace that belonged more to aircraft than pedestrians. The wind patterns at this altitude were different too, less predictable and carrying sounds from surprising distances. Maya could hear fragments of radio communication from emergency services below. Apparently, her climb had triggered protocols for high-angle rescue situations, though no intervention was imminent as long as she continued making progress safely. The knowledge that trained professionals were standing by provided both comfort and pressure. Comfort because help was available if needed, pressure because failure would mobilize expensive and dangerous rescue operations. The technical demands of the 40th floor tested every skill Maya had developed. The holds were smaller and more widely spaced, requiring longer reaches that stretched her already fatigued muscles. She found herself using techniques that felt more like problem-solving than climbing, finding creative solutions to geometric puzzles that had no obvious answers. One sequence required Maya to perform what climbers called a dyno, a dynamic move where she had to release all contact with the wall and catch a distant hold before gravity pulled her away from the building. The technique demanded perfect timing and absolute commitment. Hesitation or doubt would guarantee failure. Maya visualized the move 3 times before attempting it, mapping the precise body position and timing required. When she finally committed, the motion felt like controlled flight. A moment of complete disconnection from the building followed by the satisfying thump of her hand connecting with the target hold. The successful dyno carried her past the 40th floor and into the building's final architectural section. Here, the facade began to step back in preparation for the crown that topped the Meridian Tower. The setbacks created both opportunities and obstacles, providing ledges for rest but also forcing Maya to navigate around projecting elements that blocked direct vertical progress. Maya's communication with the ground team had become less frequent as she climbed higher. The effort required to form words and process responses was beginning to compete with the attention demanded by the climb itself. She conserved her energy for essential communications, trusting that her support team was tracking her progress and would alert her to any critical information. Floor 42 brought an unexpected gift, a section where previous maintenance work had left subtle modifications to the building's surface. Anchor points that weren't visible from ground level provided secure holds that allowed Maya to climb with confidence rather than constantly testing each grip. The reprieve was brief but psychologically valuable, reminding her that the building was constructed by humans and bore traces of their presence. As Maya approached the 45th floor, she began to sense the psychological shift that would carry her through the final phase of the climb. The cumulative fatigue was real and significant, but it was being overshadowed by the growing certainty that she would succeed. Each floor completed added to a momentum that felt increasingly unstoppable. The city spread below her like a living map, with traffic patterns and human activity visible as flows of motion rather than individual elements. Maya had transcended her normal relationship with Phoenix, seeing it from a perspective reserved for pilots and passengers in aircraft. But unlike them, she had reached this vantage point through her own effort, each foot of elevation earned through skill, strength, and determination. The morning sun had warmed the air enough to create thermal updrafts along the building's face. Maya could feel gentle air currents that hadn't existed at lower altitudes. Another reminder that she was climbing through a three-dimensional environment where atmospheric conditions changed with elevation. She was no longer just scaling a building, she was navigating through layers of the sky itself. 5 floors remained between Maya and the completion of her challenge. 5 floors that would determine whether months of preparation and a lifetime of playing it safe would culminate in the most extraordinary achievement she could imagine. The 46th floor introduced Maya to a realm where physics and psychology converged in ways she'd never experienced. At this altitude, every breath carried the thin taste of high atmosphere, and the building swayed almost imperceptibly in response to wind forces that were invisible at ground level. Maya could feel the structure's movement through her fingertips, a gentle rhythm that connected her directly to the engineering principles she'd studied for years, but never experienced as a living reality. The crowd below had grown substantial enough to create its own dynamics. Maya could see the gathering as an organic shape that pulsed and shifted as people arrived, departed, and repositioned themselves for better viewing angles. Police barriers had appeared to manage the growing spectacle, and she counted at least 3 news vans positioned at strategic locations around the building's base. What surprised her most was how little the attention affected her focus. The months of training had created a mental discipline that allowed her to acknowledge external stimuli without being distracted by them. The crowd, the cameras, the helicopters hovering at a safe distance, they existed in her awareness, but didn't penetrate the concentrated bubble of attention required for each sequential move upward. Floor 47 marked the beginning of the building's crown section, where the architects had indulged in purely aesthetic elements that served no structural purpose beyond visual impact. These decorative features created a maze of projections, recesses, and angular transitions that demanded route-finding skills Maya had never fully developed. She paused at the transition point, studying the 3-dimensional puzzle above her head. The holds were there, but they didn't follow any logical pattern. This section would require intuitive climbing, reading the wall through touch and movement rather than visual analysis. Maya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself for a passage that would test her kinesthetic intelligence rather than her engineering training. The first moves into the crown section felt like entering foreign territory. The holds faced different directions, requiring Maya to grip with her palms vertical, horizontal, and even inverted. Her body position shifted constantly as she adapted to surfaces that seemed designed more for aesthetic impact than functional climbing. Each move demanded creative problem-solving in real time. Halfway through the 47th floor, Maya encountered what appeared to be an impossible section, a smooth panel of glass with no visible holds extending for nearly 8 feet vertically. Her reconnaissance from ground level had missed this detail, and her backup route options were no longer accessible given her current position. Maya hung from her last secure hold and explored the smooth section with her free hand. What felt featureless initially revealed subtle textures under careful examination. The glass panel had been installed with nearly invisible seams that created hairline gaps between sections. These gaps were barely wide enough for fingertip contact, but they provided just enough friction to make progress possible. The technique required to climb the smooth section pushed Maya into territory beyond anything she'd practiced. She moved with her fingertips pressed into the seams, her feet smearing against the glass surface in search of any microscopic irregularity that could provide support. The position was exhausting and precarious, but it was possible. As she worked through the technical puzzle, Maya felt her perspective on the entire climb shift fundamentally. This wasn't just about reaching the top of a building anymore. It was about discovering capacities within herself that went beyond training or preparation. She was improvising solutions to problems that hadn't existed until she encountered them, drawing on resources she didn't know she possessed. The 48th floor brought Maya face to face with the psychological reality of extreme exposure. At this height, the margin for error had effectively disappeared. A fall from this altitude would be fatal regardless of landing surface or rescue response. The knowledge created a clarity of focus that was both terrifying and liberating. Every move mattered absolutely, which paradoxically made decision-making simpler. Maya's breathing had evolved into a rhythm that matched her climbing cadence. Each upward move corresponded to an exhale, each pause to an inhale. The pattern had emerged naturally as her body optimized oxygen delivery to muscles that were operating at the edge of their capacity. She'd entered a physiological state that felt both sustainable and fragile. The communication system crackled with a transmission from Marcus. "Maya, you're climbing into uncharted territory now. How's your energy level?" "Depleted but functional," she replied honestly. 2 floors to go." "Copy that." "Remember, the final section includes maintenance equipment that might not be obvious from your angle. Stay flexible with your route selection." Maya acknowledged the information and continued upward. Floor 49 featured the building's mechanical systems, ventilation intakes, communication equipment, and service access points that created a complex landscape of metal and concrete. Unlike the glass facade below, this section offered abundant holds but required careful assessment to distinguish between structural elements and equipment that might not support human weight. She tested each potential hold methodically, loading it gradually while maintaining backup contact points. Some equipment shifted under pressure, ruling it out as a climbing surface. Other elements proved surprisingly solid, apparently over-engineered for their intended function. Maya navigated the mechanical forest with patient deliberation, understanding that haste here could undo everything she'd accomplished. The psychological impact of reaching floor 49 was profound. Maya could see the building's actual roof, not just the promise of its eventual appearance, but the concrete reality of the surface that marked her destination. The goal that had seemed impossibly distant 3 hours earlier was now within reach, separated from her by roughly 20 feet of vertical climbing. The realization triggered an unexpected emotional response. Maya felt tears forming as the magnitude of her accomplishment became real. She was going to succeed. The months of preparation, the physical transformation, the systematic conquest of fear, all of it culminated in an achievement that would permanently alter how she understood her own capabilities. But the emotional moment also carried a warning. Maya had seen climbers fail within sight of their goals, undone by the premature celebration that caused them to lose focus during the final critical moves. She deliberately suppressed the surge of anticipation and redirected her attention to the immediate technical demands. The transition from floor 49 to the final approach revealed the climb's ultimate challenge. The building's roof was protected by a decorative cornice that projected outward, creating an overhang that would require Maya to climb with her body angled backward from the vertical wall. The position would demand every technique she'd learned, applied simultaneously under conditions of maximum exposure. Maya studied the overhang sequence with the analytical mind that had served her throughout the climb. The holds were adequate, but widely spaced. The sequence would require precise timing and confident commitment. Most critically, it would demand that she trust her training completely. moving with fluid aggression rather than the careful testing that had characterized her ascent. She positioned herself at the base of the overhang and performed her pre-climb ritual one final time. Chalk on the hands, 3 deep breaths, visualization of the sequence. Maya looked down at the city spread below her feet, a perspective she'd earned through effort and determination that most people would never experience. The first move onto the overhang committed her to completion. Maya powered through the sequence with controlled intensity, her body flowing through positions that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Left hand to a narrow ledge, right foot high on a decorative element, shift weight outward, reach for the lip of the roof. Her fingers closed around the building's edge at exactly 9:47 a.m., 3 hours and 4 minutes after beginning her ascent. Maya pulled herself over the lip onto the roof of the Meridian Tower, completing a climb that had transformed her from a safety-conscious engineer into someone capable of extraordinary physical achievement. She lay on the gravel surface of the roof, feeling the solidity of horizontal ground for the first time in hours. The city of Phoenix stretched in every direction around her, no longer viewed from below but spread out as a pure landscape that she'd earned the right to survey from this ultimate vantage point. Maya's radio crackled with excited voices from the ground team, but she needed a moment to process what she'd accomplished privately before engaging with the external celebration. She had climbed 50 floors of glass and steel using nothing but her hands, her feet, and the accumulated skills of 3 months' preparation. More importantly, she had discovered reservoirs of capability within herself that would reshape every future challenge she encountered. The descent would be by elevator, but the real journey was complete. Maya Rodriguez had scaled the Meridian Tower and, in doing so, had scaled the limitations she'd once accepted as permanent features of her existence. The rooftop of the Meridian Tower existed in a different world entirely. At 520 feet above Phoenix, Maya found herself in a space that few humans ever occupied, a realm where the city's sounds reached her as a distant murmur and the morning air carried the thin quality of genuine altitude. The gravel beneath her hands felt impossibly solid after hours of trusting her life to fingertip holds on glass and steel. Maya stood slowly, her legs shaking not from fear, but from the physiological after-effects of sustained climbing. Her muscles were cramping in patterns she'd never experienced, the delayed response to exertion that pushed every fiber beyond its normal operating parameters. She walked carefully to the roof's edge, looking down at the ant-like figures of the crowd that had gathered 50 floors below. The helicopter that had been tracking her ascent hovered nearby, its camera crew capturing footage of her arrival at the summit. Maya waved briefly, then turned her attention to the radio communication that had been buzzing insistently since she'd pulled herself over the roof's edge. "Maya, this is Jessica. Are you okay? Can you respond?" "I'm here," Maya said, her voice hoarse from the climb. "I'm on the roof. I did it." The explosion of voices through the radio was immediate and chaotic. Jessica, Marcus, Sarah, and others, all talking simultaneously in excitement and relief. Maya smiled despite her exhaustion, but she also felt a strange sense of disconnection from their celebration. The achievement was hers, earned through months of preparation and 3 hours of intense physical and mental effort, yet sharing it felt oddly diminishing. She walked across the roof, exploring the mechanical equipment and utility structures that served the building's upper floors. Air conditioning units hummed quietly, their vibration transmitted through the concrete into the soles of her climbing shoes. Communication antennas reached toward the sky like technological prayers, connecting the building to networks that spanned the globe. Maya found herself drawn to the roof's southwest corner, where the view encompassed the entire Phoenix metropolitan area. From this vantage point, the city revealed patterns invisible from ground level. The geometric precision of the street grid, the organic clustering of residential neighborhoods, the linear corridors of commercial development, all became elements in a vast urban composition that she was experiencing from a perspective reserved for architects, pilots, and the rare individuals who climbed buildings. Her phone, which she'd carried but kept silent during the climb, began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. Word of her ascent had apparently spread far beyond the immediate area. Maya scrolled through messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers who had somehow obtained her contact information. One message stood out from her supervisor at Pinnacle Design. "Maya, what you've accomplished is extraordinary. When you're ready to talk, we need to discuss some opportunities that have emerged." The implications hit her gradually. The climb hadn't just been a personal challenge. It had been a public demonstration of capabilities that would reshape how people viewed her professionally. The engineer who had spent years calculating bathroom tile loads was now someone who had solved complex technical problems under extreme pressure, while performing an athletic feat that bordered on the impossible. Maya's contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of building security via the roof access door. She'd been expecting this moment, understanding that her presence on the roof would trigger protocols regardless of how she'd arrived there. The security chief, a woman in her 50s with the bearing of former law enforcement, approached with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Patricia Williams, head of security for this building. I need to understand how you came to be on this roof." Maya explained the situation calmly, providing contact information for Detective Torres and the documentation that Jessica had arranged. Williams listened with professional attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions that suggested she was more interested in ensuring Maya's safety than pursuing legal complications. "I have to ask," Williams said finally, "why did you choose our building?" "Because it was the right height and the right challenge," Maya replied. "And because I work across the street. I've been looking at this building every day for 2 years, and I needed to know if I could climb it." Williams nodded slowly. "I've been in security for 20 years, and I've never encountered anything like this. Honestly, I'm more impressed than concerned." "Do you need medical attention?" Maya assessed her condition objectively. Her muscles were fatigued but functional, her hands were abraded but not seriously injured, and her overall physiological state was consistent with intense exercise rather than medical emergency. "I'm okay. Tired, but okay." The elevator ride to ground level felt surreal after the hours of vertical ascent by muscle power alone. Maya watched the floor numbers descend in rapid sequence, each one representing terrain she had conquered through individual effort. The mechanical efficiency of the elevator made her recent accomplishments seem even more extraordinary by contrast. The building's lobby had been transformed into an impromptu media center. News crews had set up equipment, creating pools of artificial light that turned the space into a television studio. Maya emerged from the elevator to find herself at the center of attention from reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers who had gathered to witness the aftermath of her climb. Jessica pushed through the crowd to reach her first, enveloping Maya in a hug that conveyed relief, pride, and a touch of disbelief. "I can't believe you actually did it," she whispered. "I mean, I knew you could, but seeing it happen." Marcus appeared next, his expression mixing professional assessment with personal admiration. "How do you feel? Any injuries? Any moments where you thought you might not make it?" "There were challenging sections," Maya replied carefully, aware that her words were being recorded by multiple devices. "But the preparation was thorough, and the techniques held up under real-world conditions." The questions from reporters came rapidly, overlapping and interrupting each other in their eagerness to capture her first public statements. Maya found herself drawing on communication skills she didn't know she possessed, providing coherent answers while processing the strange reality of being the focus of such intense attention. "What made you think you could climb a 50-story building?" "The engineering analysis showed it was technically possible, and the training proved I could develop the necessary skills." "Were you ever afraid you might fall?" "Fear was part of the experience, but it was managed through preparation and technique." "What's next for you?" Maya paused at this question, realizing she hadn't considered the aftermath beyond the completion of the climb itself. "I suppose I'll go back to work and see what opportunities this opens up." The crowd gradually dispersed as the immediate media interest was satisfied, leaving Maya with her core support team in the relative quiet of the lobby. Sarah showed her some of the footage she'd captured, revealing angles of the climb that Maya had never seen. Watching herself navigate the building's facade was like observing a different person, someone more capable and confident than she remembered being. Detective Torres approached as they prepared to leave. "Officially, this never happened," he said with a slight smile. "Unofficially, that was the most impressive thing I've seen in 15 years of law enforcement. The building management has decided not to pursue any charges, considering the positive publicity and the fact that no property was damaged." As Maya walked through downtown Phoenix toward her car, she felt the city around her in a completely different way. Every building now represented potential rather than obstacles. Every vertical surface carried the possibility of exploration, rather than the assumption of impassability. The climb had changed more than her physical capabilities. It had altered her fundamental relationship with the urban environment. Her student loan debt was gone, eliminated by Jessica's promised payment. But more significantly, the limitations she'd accepted as permanent features of her existence had been revealed as temporary barriers that could be overcome through dedication and systematic effort. The engineer who had played it safe for 26 years had discovered that safety itself was a choice rather than a necessity. "You look conflicted," Jessica observed as they settled into their booth. "I thought the post-climb phase would be pure celebration." "It's complicated," Maya replied. "I've got job offers, interview requests, people wanting me to endorse climbing equipment I've never used. The climb was supposed to be about conquering fear, not building a career." Jessica sipped her wine thoughtfully. Maybe the two aren't mutually exclusive. What if the climb was preparing you for opportunities you didn't know you wanted? Or what if accepting those opportunities turns the climb into something it wasn't supposed to be? What was it supposed to be? Maya considered the question seriously. Proof that I could do something extraordinary. Proof that the limitations I'd accepted weren't actually real. "And did you prove that?" "Definitely." "Then everything else is bonus. You can choose to leverage your accomplishment or not, but the core achievement can't be diminished by what happens afterward." Their conversation was interrupted by a young woman who approached their table hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Maya Rodriguez, the climber?" Maya nodded, preparing for the usual questions about technique and training. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman continued. "I saw the videos of your climb, and it inspired me to try rock climbing for the first time. I've been afraid of heights my whole life, but watching someone overcome that fear made me think I could too." After the woman left, Maya sat quietly, processing the unexpected dimension of her achievement. She had climbed the Meridian Tower for personal reasons, but the act had somehow transcended individual accomplishment to become a symbol that encouraged others to challenge their own limitations. "This is what I didn't anticipate," Maya said. "The climb affected people I've never met." "Maybe that's the real measure of an extraordinary achievement," Jessica replied. "Not just what it does for you, but what it enables for others." The following week brought a different kind of opportunity. Marcus called with an invitation to join an expedition attempting to establish new climbing routes on remote peaks in Patagonia. The team needed someone with engineering expertise to assess the technical feasibility of proposed lines and design anchor systems for previously unclimbed walls. "It's not about fame or career advancement," Marcus explained during their meeting at the climbing gym. "It's about pure exploration, going places where humans have never been, solving problems that have never been solved." Maya watched other climbers working through problems on the gym's walls, each one engaged in their own dialogue with gravity and technique. The Patagonia expedition represented everything she discovered she loved about climbing: the integration of technical knowledge, physical skill, and mental discipline in service of seemingly impossible goals. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "We'd leave in 8 weeks. 4 months in the field, maybe 5 if weather delays the access flights." Maya found herself torn between competing visions of her future. The Dubai project offered financial security and professional recognition. The Patagonia expedition offered adventure and the pure satisfaction of exploration. Both represented dramatic departures from the safe path she'd followed for most of her adult life. Her decision-making process was complicated by another unexpected development. A publisher had contacted her about writing a book detailing her preparation for and execution of the Meridian Tower climb. The advance they offered was substantial, but more importantly, the project would require her to articulate the psychological and technical aspects of her transformation in ways that might benefit other people facing their own seemingly impossible challenges. Maya drove home through familiar streets that now felt different, populated by possibilities she was only beginning to understand. The climb was complete, but the real journey, the one that would define the rest of her life, was just beginning. 3 weeks after conquering the Meridian Tower, Maya discovered that extraordinary achievements create their own complications. Her desk at Pinnacle Design had become a museum of congratulatory flowers, cards, and interview requests that required daily management. The phone calls started before 7 a.m. and continued past business hours, each one representing an opportunity she'd never imagined needing to evaluate. The most unexpected consequence was the shift in how colleagues interacted with her. Engineers who had barely acknowledged her existence now sought her input on projects completely unrelated to her climbing experience. The transformation puzzled Maya until she realized that demonstrating extreme capability in one domain had somehow validated her potential in all others. Her supervisor, David Chen, had scheduled what he called a strategic career discussion for Tuesday morning. Maya entered his corner office to find architectural plans spread across every available surface. Ambitious projects that pushed the boundaries of structural design in ways that reminded her uncomfortably of her recent vertical adventure. "Maya, I'll get straight to the point," David began. "Your climb has generated significant attention for our firm. We've received inquiries about your availability for consulting projects that specifically request the engineer who scaled the Meridian Tower." He showed her a project proposal from a development company in Dubai. They wanted to construct a residential tower with external climbing routes integrated into the building's design, architecture that would serve both as living space and recreational infrastructure. The concept was radical, expensive, and exactly the kind of innovative thinking Maya had dreamed of pursuing before she'd convinced herself such opportunities didn't exist. "They're offering a consulting fee that's 3 times your annual salary," David continued, "plus travel expenses and project bonuses. The timeline would require 6 months in Dubai, working with their architectural team to develop climbing-friendly structural systems." Maya studied the proposal documents, her engineer's mind automatically analyzing the technical challenges. Integrating climbing routes into a residential building would require completely reimagining how facades were designed and constructed. Load distribution, weather resistance, safety systems, every element would need innovation. "What's the catch?" she asked. "No catch, exactly. But accepting this project would mean leaving Pinnacle Design. This isn't something we can accommodate within our current structure." The decision represented everything Maya had supposedly wanted: creative challenges, international exposure, compensation that would transform her financial situation permanently. Yet she found herself hesitating, not from fear, but from a growing understanding that external validation wasn't the driving force behind her climb. "I need time to consider this," she said finally. David nodded. "Take all the time you need, but understand that opportunities like this don't typically wait indefinitely." Maya left the meeting with her mind churning through implications she hadn't anticipated. The climb had been intensely personal, a test of her own capabilities rather than a career strategy. The possibility that it might reshape her professional life entirely felt both exciting and overwhelming. That evening, Maya met Jessica at a new restaurant in Scottsdale, chosen specifically because it was unlikely to attract the climbing enthusiasts who had begun recognizing her in public. The attention was flattering but exhausting, turning simple activities like grocery shopping into impromptu question-and-answer sessions about technique and motivation. "I never thought of myself as a writer," Maya confided to Sarah during one of their follow-up interviews for the documentary footage. "But maybe that's the point. I never thought of myself as a climber either." Sarah lowered her camera. "What do you think of yourself now?" Maya considered the question while looking across the street at the Meridian Tower. From ground level, it looked exactly as it had before her climb, an impressive but static piece of architecture. The difference was in her relationship to it, and by extension, to every other challenge that had once seemed insurmountable. "I think of myself as someone who solves problems," she said finally, "whether they're engineering problems, physical problems, or psychological problems. The specific domain matters less than the approach." That night, Maya made her decision about the competing opportunities. She declined the Dubai consulting project, explaining that while she was flattered by the offer, she wasn't ready to leverage her climbing achievement for conventional career advancement. Instead, she accepted the Patagonia expedition invitation and committed to writing the book about her experience. The choices felt risky in exactly the way that climbing the Meridian Tower had felt risky, uncertain outcomes balanced against the potential for extraordinary growth. Maya had learned that safety was often an illusion, and that the greatest risks came from avoiding challenge rather than embracing it. As she prepared for sleep, Maya looked out her apartment window at the Phoenix skyline, no longer seeing obstacles but possibilities. Tomorrow would bring another day of training, planning, and preparation for adventures she couldn't yet imagine. The climb had ended, but the journey it initiated was just beginning to reveal its true scope. 6 months later, Maya stood at the edge of a granite cliff in Torres del Paine National Park, her hands pressed against rock that had never known human touch. The wind carried the scent of ice and stone from peaks that rose like cathedral spires into the Patagonian sky. Below her, 3,000 feet of empty air separated her from the valley floor, where their base camp looked like a collection of colorful dots against the endless expanse of wilderness. The expedition had pushed Maya beyond every boundary she thought she understood about herself. The remote mountains of Patagonia demanded skills that went far beyond technical climbing, weather prediction, high-altitude physiology, emergency medicine, and psychological resilience that sustained teams through weeks of isolation and uncertainty. She had evolved from someone who climbed buildings to someone who pioneered routes through landscapes that existed at the edge of human exploration. The anchor system looked solid, called Elena Vasquez, the expedition's lead climber, as she tested the protection Maya had designed for their descent. "Your engineering background is proving invaluable out here." Maya smiled, adjusting the innovative anchor design she developed specifically for Patagonian granite. The system distributed loads across multiple contact points, providing security even when individual rock features proved unreliable. It was precisely the kind of creative problem-solving that had drawn her to engineering originally, before bureaucracy and routine had convinced her that innovation was impractical. Their current objective was a previously unclimbed face on Cerro Torre's satellite peaks, a wall that had defeated 3 previous expeditions due to its combination of technical difficulty and unpredictable weather. Maya's team had spent 2 weeks establishing camps and fixed lines, methodically solving the puzzle of ascent through terrain that alternated between vertical rock and overhanging ice. The physical demands of expedition climbing dwarfed anything Maya had experienced during her building ascent. Days began before dawn with equipment preparation, continued through 8 to 12 hours of technical climbing in extreme conditions, and ended with the complex logistics of high-altitude camping. Every calorie consumed, every piece of gear carried, every decision about weather and route finding carried consequences that could determine the expedition's success or failure. But the psychological rewards were equally profound. Maya had discovered that her capacity for sustained effort under pressure extended far beyond what she'd demonstrated on the Meridian Tower. The building climb had been a sprint compared to the marathon of expedition mountaineering, yet the fundamental skills, problem-solving under stress, managing fear, trusting technique over emotion, translated perfectly to the more complex environment. "Here, Maya, we need your input on the crux section," Marcus called from his position 40 feet above. Even in Patagonia, he continued to serve as her mentor, though their relationship had evolved into genuine partnership as Maya's skills developed. She ascended the fixed line to join him at a belay station carved into the ice. The route ahead looked impossible, a smooth granite wall interrupted by a narrow crack system that would require precise technique and absolute commitment. Traditional climbing protection would be marginal at best, meaning that a fall could result in serious injury even with proper safety systems. "What do you think?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the crux section. Maya studied the rock with eyes trained by months of reading stone and ice. The crack system was more complex than it appeared from below, offering multiple options for protection placement and route selection. Her engineering background allowed her to assess load distribution and failure modes in ways that pure intuition couldn't match. "It's doable," she said finally. "The key is recognizing that the obvious line isn't necessarily the best line. There's a hidden sequence that follows the rock's natural structure instead of fighting it." Maya volunteered to lead the crux section, understanding that her technical analysis gave her the best chance of reading the route correctly. She tied into the sharp end of the rope and began the delicate process of ascending rock that had never supported human weight. The climbing demanded absolute precision. Each hold had to be tested carefully, every movement calculated to minimize stress on marginal protection. Maya found herself drawing on techniques she'd developed during the Meridian Tower ascent, but applied to granite that responded completely differently from glass and steel. 40 feet above the belay, Maya reached the section that had stopped previous attempts. The crack system narrowed to a seam, barely wide enough for fingertip placement, while the adjacent face offered no alternative holds. The position required her to hang from minimal finger contact while her feet explored blank rock for any microscopic irregularity that could provide support. Maya paused in the exposed position, her mind automatically calculating the physics of her situation, while her intuition assessed the emotional landscape of the challenge. This moment encapsulated everything she'd learned about managing extreme situations. the integration of technical knowledge, physical skill, and psychological control that enabled humans to achieve seemingly impossible goals. She committed to the sequence with the same focused aggression she'd used for the Meridian Tower's final overhang. The moves flowed naturally despite their difficulty, each one building on the momentum of the previous placement. Maya discovered holds that weren't visible from below, found a rhythm that transformed desperate positions into controlled progress. 20 minutes later, she anchored herself to solid granite at the top of the crux section and called down to Marcus, "The route goes!" It's harder than it looks, but it definitely goes. The success of the crux section opened the way to the summit, which they reached 3 days later after weathering a storm that tested every aspect of their preparation and teamwork. Standing on the previously unclimbed peak, Maya looked out over the Patagonian ice fields and felt a satisfaction that dwarfed anything she'd experienced during her building climb. The Meridian Tower had been about proving to herself that extraordinary achievement was possible. This expedition had been about discovering that extraordinary achievement was just the beginning, that each challenge overcome revealed new possibilities that had been invisible from the previous vantage point. The descent and return to base camp marked the end of the climbing phase, but Maya's relationship with the expedition continued through the months of documentation and analysis that followed. Her technical innovations, particularly the anchor systems and route-finding methodologies she'd developed, contributed to a body of knowledge that would enable future expeditions to attempt even more ambitious objectives. Back in Phoenix, Maya found that her perspective on urban climbing had evolved as dramatically as everything else in her life. She still looked at buildings with a climber's eye, but now she saw them as elements in a larger landscape of possibility, rather than isolated challenges. The skills she developed in Patagonia, long-term planning, team leadership, technical innovation under pressure, applied to every aspect of her professional and personal life. The book about her Meridian Tower experience had been completed during quiet evenings at base camp, written on a laptop powered by solar panels and sustained by insights that emerged from months of reflection in the mountains. The manuscript explored not just the technical aspects of building climbing, but the psychological transformation that occurred when people systematically expanded their sense of what was possible. Maya's publisher scheduled the book release to coincide with a speaking tour that would take her to climbing conferences, engineering symposiums, and business leadership seminars. The diversity of audiences reflected how her story had transcended specific domains to become relevant to anyone facing challenges that seemed insurmountable. On the anniversary of her Meridian Tower climb, Maya returned to the building not as a climber, but as a consultant. The Dubai project she'd declined had evolved into a Phoenix-based initiative to integrate climbing features into urban architecture. The city's planning commission had invited her to lead the design team, recognizing that her unique combination of engineering expertise and climbing experience made her the ideal person to pioneer this new field. Standing in the shadow of the Meridian Tower, Maya reflected on the journey that had begun with Jessica's challenge over dinner and led through achievements she couldn't have imagined a year earlier. The building looked exactly the same, but her relationship to it, and to every other challenge in her life, had been permanently transformed. The climb itself had taken 3 hours. The transformation it initiated was ongoing, revealing new dimensions of possibility with each passing month. Maya had learned that the most significant barriers to extraordinary achievement weren't external obstacles, but internal assumptions about what was possible. Once those assumptions were challenged and overcome, the world revealed itself as a place of unlimited potential for anyone willing to prepare systematically and commit completely to their objectives. She walked away from the Meridian Tower knowing that somewhere in Phoenix, another person was looking at another impossible challenge and wondering if they had what it would take to overcome it. Maya's answer, proven through her own experience and applicable to any domain, was unequivocal. They did. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.